The Diary of Thoughts, Part 16. Honesty in Business and Private Life. Written by c.pacheco. This chapter talks about an interesting subject to develop, as the word honesty has different interpretations according to the ones who practice it. This analysis also happens in similarity with other different areas as definitions about truth and lie, right and wrong, and so on. A common factor related to all these intrinsic elements, it's called hypocrisy, a word that makes part of all of us human beings, but nobody wants to assume. Let's start by saying that there is a secret area inside of us that nobody can invade, and mostly that cannot be explained to others, even to ourselves. After all, we don't even know 100% about ourselves. Let's be honest about that. As a matter of fact, I consider that we're all hypocrites in a certain degree, as I also think that we can define the practice of honesty in society as, some people are dishonest, and others aren't completely honest. I believe that it clarifies my point of view, and the most part will agree with that. Let's make the analogy between honesty and truth, and we'll find out why they are so similar. There is truth, the necessary lie, and the unnecessary truth. Honesty works under this platform, and that means there is a middle way to compensate the opposite sides and create an artificial comfort, or justification to find ourselves in that middle term. We call it to be reasonable. We always were able to create labels for everything we do. Society reached a point when the established political power uses truth as an argument to discredit their real truth. The use of truth to create doubt is one of the most powerful weapons to disguise the reality or the actual truth of the facts. The use of the words liberty and democracy can sometimes be translated by an exaggerated visual or virtual truth, leading to discredit the real truth that stays behind the scenes, hiding crime, corruption, and manipulation of society. This fact can be proved by the extreme exaggeration that we can find in some images, messages, and scenes of several documentaries and news that are constantly present nowadays on TV, films, and newspapers. Sometimes truth becomes so hard to believe that truth itself becomes a possible lie, the main goal after all. The actual situation that concerns the behavior of society is nowadays influenced by all the media and its manipulation of people in general. The purpose of presenting extreme images regarding shocking people is to create an involuntary acceptance of all the facts that imply tragedy, corruption, even criminality, as if they were regular occurrences in society's daily life. This method of brainwashing is in a confrontation with the alleged evolution of society. Reality in confrontation with truth, and the necessary lie in confrontation with human evolution. The appliance of truth in our daily relationship is not possible. There are elements related to our existence that maintain us alive as dreams and illusions. If we don't dream, we'll never be able to live. The strength of being alive is given by every single particle of energy that our mind creates to be possible to overcome our obstacles and difficulties along the road of our lives. Do you think that religion was completely honest while explaining to society about the origins of life, or science is about to tell us everything that they know? Do you think that governments elected by the so-called democratic vote act in an honest way after attaining power? When I was in my 20s, I had to take my father to Sweden to have surgery due to a lethal disease. My father was a brilliant individual and always tried to accomplish his missions according to his truth. His notions about truth were given to me as a child, as I was always told to accept truth and accept reality. In fact, both things are intrinsically connected. My father was a strong man, but the kind of health problem that he had was a more substantial element that crashes millions of souls. He was also a brilliant man, and like any other person, he also had his dreams and delusions. During 3 months he stood bravely at the hospital, thinking that he merely had a standard health problem, and he would surmount it. By this belief, he hung on to until the moment I took him to Sweden. Over there, and according to the medical policy of truth, a doctor told him about his real problem. I cannot forget the image I had for my father calling my mother to say his final goodbye after knowing the truth. This example reveals an unnecessary truth that can have its consequences as any other truth of that kind. In this same perspective, we could say that it was a sort of harmful truth that nobody needs to know. Let's say that no one needs to be as honest as that. Of course, for the doctor that explained this realistic situation to my father, it didn't mean a thing. Probably he never thought about the possible consequences of explaining the scientific definition about my father's health condition. For him, it was a natural truth. Maybe because it was his profession and related analysis, or maybe because he wasn't at his patient's place. In private life, honesty is also a very sensitive subject, and it's adapted to every single circumstance. In most couple relationships, husband and wife pretend to love each other, maintaining the same marital platform just to assure their maintenance, their survival, as their marriage also became a kind of institution. Honesty within a couple is directly related to the word trust and also respect, thinking that nobody's perfect and everyone can fail. Everything can happen to everyone depending on the circumstances, and it's at each one of us to tell the truth at the moment that we feel it's the right one. This attitude reveals the moment of truth for those who have the honesty and courage to assume them. Honesty within a couple can also mean that they have an honest way to accept their dishonesty in every appliance of the word. This honesty within dishonesty exists as an honest platform. Let's say that is the same thing as to say, I know that you're honest enough to understand my dishonesty. Relationships between parents and their children are based on necessary lies when they have to explain about what their origins are, later on about old Santa Claus, and other different areas of parents' relationship, but still an honest way to explain it. Also at an individual level, notions about being honest or dishonest can change a lot according to personal views. Recently I made an acquaintance that told me that he had never made a download of a torrent, get some music or videos, movies or whatever, because it was not honest. On the other hand, he accepted all the smuggled copies that he could receive from friends, and even made beautiful covers for them to look like the original ones. We can say this is a case of hypocritical honesty. Human dialogue uses several platforms of communication that we can compare with the use of diplomacy, being this one a necessity to attain several goals on a basis of courtesy and mannerisms, still forgetting that most of the time diplomacy reveals a cynicism that prevails in the end. If diplomacy as any other thing in life were applied in the right way, it would be a platform to reach understanding, and in a certain way it is, as it maintains a certain balance between the existing relationship between human beings. Finally, let's get to the conclusion that cynicism and diplomacy are linked, are a necessity, and they can be used in a positive or negative way, like everything else. We all have to handle the best way we can our intrinsic cynicism. Let's say that we all have to assume that we're all cynical at a certain point of our lives and during our relationship with others. By the fact of keeping in silence and not revealing our opinions about other people around us, we become involuntarily cynical in one way or another. The application of cynicism in our lives is a constant but also necessary to avoid non-useful confrontations, and to be aware that this is an element that will always be present and cannot be avoided. There is the good cynicism and the bad cynicism, being this last one an open door for fighting, aggressing, insulting and disrespecting, though something to be avoided as it is useless in its final result. Never invalidating that cynicism will always be present in these two different situations. Let's say that the best way to neutralize the bad cynicism is to use the good cynicism to absorb it, which makes the difference between people and their ways to solve problems and find solutions or create conflicts between them. Finally, we can also say that the difference between these two forms of cynicism stays on the good or bad intentions of each person, but surely that we all are cynical to some extent. In business terms, let's start by the bank policy to say that they claim to be honest, but finally, they survive manipulating the whole society financially at the point to cause an economical chaos where all our savings are down the drain. Some individuals become dishonest, or considered as that by the fact that their business went wrong, and they were exceeded by the rest of related events. We can become dishonest to the eyes of other people without wanting to be, when causing misery to someone else who depended on our business. Some people consider dishonesty as a standard platform for business, others are the victims of an involuntary dishonesty. The first ones keep on living under that basis, thinking that they are honest, others get affected by that situation and engage themselves personally in compensating the eventual victims they didn't want to cause in first place. That's called honesty. This behavior implies the human factor, namely their individual formation and education. It also implies two other words that are almost no longer used in society as dignity and pride. Some people don't understand a business failure of somebody else forgetting that they made their victims, even involuntary. Finally, this is the best explanation the guys of Wall Street can give to the whole planet. They didn't do it on purpose, but they did it. The difference between those financial institutions and some individual is that there are still some people who have enough dignity to assume their responsibilities, in contrast with those called institutions that just can't find that word on their internal dictionary. There is also a difference between legal honesty and honesty, and what we are obliged to face today is a pure example of using the first one to cover the contrary of the latter. I'm sure that you still remember the movie with Michael Douglas, Wall Street, where it is clearly exposed the mentality of the people who controls and manipulates global economy. Concerning the economical chaos that we are all living, in this particular case by Wall Street and all services related to that economical and financial area, let's consider they are behaving in the most honest way within their intrinsic dishonesty. Meanwhile, the system judges us as being dishonest for having an individual business failure but forgetting or ignoring their own mistakes, even dishonesty. Myself, I have several examples of honesty, dishonesty, and involuntary dishonesty in my business sphere. As a mere human, I was submitted to different professional areas that obliged me to adapt the most to survive. Among several cases, I watched most cases of flagrant dishonesty while making some people rich that live on that basis of the business, forgetting about their commitments towards the ones who gave them their fortunes in the first place. That's the only way they know how to get rich, anyway. I also assisted to very honest people who accomplished with their word as a gentleman's agreement, those kind of old-fashioned agreements where we just have to shake hands, and it's done for life. Finally, I also assisted to involuntary dishonesty as we all are vulnerable to practice this last one in every business context. Ultimately, the most important difference between honesty and dishonesty in this particular context is the honest or dishonest way to assume the related responsibilities. There are people who just shut the door and disappear, others try to cover their rears using all the legal methods available, and finally those who are honest enough to assume their involuntary dishonesty. That's the world of business that also implies the world of human beings and their differences. Monarchy was always contested, but it's a fact that there are noble people, and there are vulgar slobs making part of this whole society. And each one to find their place, not forgetting that even kings were slobs at some moments of their lives. Life is a game of giving and take after all. Do you remember how many intrigues existed at the aim of several monarchies along history, or by the times of the Roman Empire? Maybe it's one of the reasons why those empires didn't last forever, as, instead of working on a continuity of events, they preferred to concentrate on the now and not on the future. Do you think that humanity learned something about these developments? Most of the people steal ideas and thoughts of others around them, and sometimes become richer by using and taking them from the ones that created them in the first place. By that fact, they accomplish with a natural and interdependent process of sharing intelligence. Still, we can consider it as robbery. In this case, let's say that this is a necessary robbery that evolution and creation impose to society, to human beings. Law treats truth and lie according to their conveniences. That's why the word criminality exists in real terms, and it is even manufactured by legal systems. About criminality, let's start by saying, criminality always has an origin. If we think that we could be living in a society where everybody could have their minimal conditions of living, allowing them to be happy and profit life as it was supposed to be benefited, criminality wouldn't have a chance to exist. The notions and standards about criminality are created by legal systems to be able to apply that label to the ones that are not practicing illegality in a legal way. In fact, there is the legalized criminality approved and blessed by the courts, and the other one that is necessary to create as an argument to make a comparison between both. In the middle of both, there are two essential elements called law and justice that sometimes are just not applied and practiced, but still exists to rule and mostly control the majority of cases in society. Let's not forget that history proved that one of the best strategies from legalized crooks and even non-legalized ones was to call attention to the wrong targets to protect their rears. This strategy was and still is used in warfare, like to crypt and decrypt messages, adulterating its sense and objective to lead the enemy to fall in that lie. Espionage and counter-espionage were always present in warfare, and all the military methods and technology used by the army is being applied to some extent in civil life. Let me remind you that the whole conception about today's internet was based on an American network of national defense, so it was adapted for social utilization as most of the technological components that we watch nowadays, making part of the car industry and other areas as aircrafting and so on. They are a result of everything that is happening regarding spatial and defensive strategy research. Returning to the subject, truth and lie makes part of the policy of creating criminality. By creating artificial truth and artificial lie, some governments deal with politics, economy and mostly finance as the source of the first ones. Criminality is necessary to establish limits. The difference between them lays in which way you condition and manipulate society while retaining power. We can be considered as a criminal while stealing an apple to feed our children, and be regarded as a hero if we are a consolidated financial crook, able to pay certain legal systems. Let's say that all those legal systems will reach perfection little by little, as the called collective understanding of society will be developed, not forgetting that all this process will be entirely controlled and managed by the ones that will allow that same development will occur, drop by drop. This charity will be given to society when the legal systems will have no other choice, as the consciousness of society will indeed evolve. Otherwise, we would be eternally in this situation of human stagnation at an economical, social, and even spiritual level. Let's all assume that there is nothing completely honest in this world and we are just trying to be as honest as possible. Isn't it the most honest assumption about honesty? Let's say that ultimate truth and honesty lays within each one of us, good or bad, beautiful or ugly, right or wrong. It's about each one of us, to be honest with ourselves and be even more honest to assume our dishonesty or involuntary dishonesty. And all this without forgetting to claim for our intrinsic honesty, for those who still have it. The Diary of Thoughts, end of part 16. Written by Carlos Pacheco. www.diaryofthoughts.com